Good afternoon all, here in this packed, tiny front room of Foam. Welcome to the first Amsterdam edition of Lunch Bytes. And it's really incredible to notice that even when we experienced the hottest Sunday in March ever recorded, you all decided to show up instead of, well, going to a terrace, the beach, the park or otherwise. Welcome again here. For the first, I said already, first Amsterdam edition of Lunch Bytes, which means that there have been other Lunch Bytes before, organized in close collaboration with the Goethe Institute. There were former editions in Washington, in London, and all Lunch Bytes were organized by Melanie Bühler, representative from the Goethe Institute, and sitting here next to me, and she will be my colleague moderator for this afternoon. So, Melanie, welcome to you and to the Goethe Institute, of course. I think it's quite known for everybody. Lunch Bytes will be focusing completely on the sometimes really fundamental changes that the media landscape experienced for the last, say, 2.5 decades, due to all kind of technological changes, mostly of a digital nature. The media landscape is still in the process of fundamental changes, and that touches upon almost every aspect of the media landscape, ranging from the artist's practice to the use, value and understanding of media. And of course, being a photography museum, we will focus exclusively on the medium photography. Having said this, I think it is absolutely true that we will also touch on other media, because it's hard to consider and speak about photography exclusively within this framework. So we'll also touch upon other media like video, sculpture, film perhaps. So we do this with a few guests, and we're quite honored to have these guests here. We have from the far end Anne de Vries, Dutch artist but living and working in Berlin. We have Katrina Sluis from the Photographers Gallery in London, and Susanne Holschbach, teaching at university at Berlin at the moment. You miss one person if you have memorized the program. Quite unfortunately, we miss Beate Butcher. She has, due to some tragic personal events, she's not able to come this afternoon, so she's excused. We do it with the three, say 5 of us, and we're quite confident that we'll make a very nice program. Before we start, I would love to give the words to my colleague Melanie Bühler to introduce the guests more in depth. So Melanie, please.
Thank you so much. Hello and good afternoon everybody. Thank you for coming. So this is the first Lunch Bytes event in Amsterdam, and my name is Melanie Bühler, as Marcel already told you, and I'm the curator of Lunch Bytes. Just to give you a little bit of background information, Lunch Bytes started in 2011 in Washington, D.C., when the Goethe Institute there asked me to come up with a program at Lunch Bytes that would deal with the cultural implications of the digital revolution, let's say so. I responded to that assignment with the concept of Lunch Bytes, a discussion series on digital art and culture. The concept of the program is to pick a topic with relevance to digital culture and to bring together two artists as well as two experts who then talk about the topic of the talk and engage in a discussion. We have organized an extensive series of events in Washington, D.C. together with the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden and have had many interesting speakers, curators such as Lauren Cornell of the New Museum or Christiane Paul of the Whitney Museum in New York, but also artists such as Raphael Rosendahl and John Brefman. The series was received very well, and we also organized evening events which constituted of live performances as well, which invited artists as well as musicians such as 106 Point Never, Cola, etc. Just to name a few again. I was also invited to present these talks during Art Basel Miami as well as Art Basel. There I chose topics that referred to this specific background. And now the project of Lunch Bytes is actually launched by the Goethe Institute in the region Northwestern Europe as a project of the Goethe Institute. In 2014 we will organize, and this has already been taking place since March, events in Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Dublin, Glasgow, Helsinki, London and Stockholm. And with all of these partners listed on the slide. This event today in Amsterdam is the fourth Lunch Bytes event, and I'm very pleased and very happy that we work with the Foam Museum here in Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, the talks will have a slightly more specific focus, namely they will each refer a little bit more specifically to photography. This brings us to the talk today. Today we will talk about the concept of the medium, and more specifically the medium of photography. We will address how digitisation has affected that concept and what kind of changes and implications that had on photography. We will hear from three different speakers today. Just on a side note, the speaker in the middle, Katrina Sluis, has lost her voice this morning. So her presentation will actually be read by Marcel Feil, the co-moderator of this talk. We apologize for this, but we just had a little bit bad luck with this talk today. Marcel actually already introduced the speakers briefly, and you also find more information on the handout about their biography, so I think we can skip that part. But before I start, I would like to thank the people involved in organizing this talk. That would be Barbara Honrath, the director of the Goethe Institute in the Netherlands. I don't see her. She's sitting right there. Then, of course, Kim Knoppers, who has co-curated the talks in Amsterdam together with me. She's also sitting somewhere.
She's there. There.
Yeah, there she is in the entrance. Yeah, always modest. Of course, Marcel Feil, who will co-moderate the talk with me. Anne van der Weijden, who is responsible for the logistics of this talk today. She's also there in the entrance. Vanya Peters, who especially helped me with some stuff for this event. She's sitting right there. And then last, but certainly not least, I would like to thank Stella Rick, who is my assistant for the whole Lunch Bytes project. With that, I would like to hand things over to Susanne Holschbach. She is the first speaker on this panel, and yeah, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Mahlzeit, you would say in Germany at this time of the day, I think. Oh, I have to get used to. Sorry. A few months ago, Oxford Dictionaries declared the neologism selfie to be the international word of the year 2013. It's certainly true that self or group portraits made with a smartphone have become an everyday occurrence. Everybody's doing it. Teenagers and their parents, film stars and politicians. The selfie is only one example of the degree to which making photos has become an integral part of our everyday lives. Communicating with photos via smartphones or social networks has become nearly as commonplace as communicating through language. Since its digitalization, and above all, since its embedding in the internet and mobile media, photography is now more ubiquitous and more popular than ever. In many ways, the expectations and visions accompanying the invention of photography in the early 19th century are only now being realized with its digitalization, its technological transformation. Which is to say, it has become a medium that is available to all people at all times, and it makes everyone and everything available as an image. In the first theoretical debates on the digitalization of photography carried out over 20 years ago, media theorists spoke of a radical break between a photographic, analog, and a post-photographic digital age. As an example, I want to quote media theorist William J. Mitchell, who in 1992 published one of the first books on the technical possibilities of image processing and its effects on our understanding of photography. The title is The Reconfigured Eye, Visual Truth in the Post-Photographic Era. He claims from the moment of its sesquicentennial in 1989, photography was dead. Or, more precisely, radically and permanently displaced, as was painting 150 years before. With digitalization, according to Mitchell and others, photography loses its truth to reality, its testimonial character, its evidential force, which is to say, the things that constitute the core of its media specificity. This argument is based on a theory of photography that derives photography's specific relation to reality from the physical-chemical process of its production. As with the smoke of a fire or the shadow of a sundial, there's a causal relation between the photo and the object that it depicts, or, in the vocabulary of semiotics, an indexical relation. In this sense, The photo is a light trace, a direct imprint of the object photographed, which is irreversibly fixed on the photochemical support, the film. The photo as index draws its particular efficacy not primarily from the realistic mode of its representation, but rather from the reference to the actual existence of the object or event depicted. That has been, as Roland Barthes in his famous essay Camera Lucida, La Chambre Claire, formulates the essence of analog, that is, chemical photography. With the replacement of film by a CCD chip, this indexical relation, the umbilical cord to the referent, this metaphor comes also from Roland Barthes, seems to have been cut. Without there being a negative, the photons are directly converted into electronic data that can be immediately processed, for example through an Instagram filter, and can be presented in most diverse forms. The reversible photo, which according to ontological theory can no longer properly be described as a photo, has become a dubitative image. An image which gives rise to a fundamental doubt concerning its authenticity. This term dubitative comes from media theorist Peter Lunenfeld. That is the theory, the ontological theory. However, our everyday experience is rather different. We still expect, for example, journalistic photographs to show an event just as the photographer found it. We expect that the photographer selects the scene but doesn't stage it or alter the photo in a falsifying way. The debates around the possible manipulation of photographs, which for example often accompany the World Press Photo Award, such as last year around the photo of the prize winner Paul Hansen, are evidence of our expectations regarding the authenticity of press photos. That has been. The guidelines for press photography require that the photographer stores the raw image file, and there are forensic methods that can be used to reconstruct the different stages of image processing. In addition, digital technology has created new forms of the index. As you know, modern cameras store not only image data, but also all kinds of additional technical data. Type of camera, serial number, the time and date the photo was made, aperture value, shutter speed, etc. Which means it is also possible to reconstruct how a photo was made. Through the storage of GPS data, a photo is linked to a specific geographic place. The that has been is supplemented by a that has been precisely there. Other traces, on the other hand, can be tracked using automatic face recognitions. Once a connection has been made between a photo and a name, potentially all other photos with this person, as long as they are shown facing the camera, can be detected. The photographs that we share in the internet, this much is clear, are a very big fish in the pool of big data. They can be evaluated in many ways with regard to different interests. 20 years after the first debates on the consequences of digitalization for the concept of photographic mediality, we know that the crucial significance of the technological transformation does not lie in the undermining of photography's truth claim. This was already precarious and contestable in the age of analog photography, dependent both on supplementary information and on the authorization of the source. It lies rather in the fact that they created the condition for the embedding of photography in the internet. Irrespective of the occasion of its making and the function it might have for the producers, the photo is transformed as soon as it enters the space of the internet. It becomes a networked image, which represents an independent category, if you want, an independent entity. As a media object, in inverted commas, it is something fundamentally different from the small piece of paper or the photo fetish of old. from the printed photo in a magazine or book, or from the framed or mounted photo on the walls of an exhibition. The condition of its visibility is a technical apparatus with a display. It is embedded in a field of text, graphics, moving images. It is linked to numerous metadata. Its size is variable. And it may appear at different sites at the same time. The dematerialization of the photo in the digital culture is the reason why the importance of the material aspect of photography, both of analog and digital, has entered consciousness at all, or in a broader sense. I would like to examine this using 3 examples taken from the art context. My first example is a very well-known one. Wolfgang Tillmann's, famous for his straight photographs, which he makes in everyday life or by traveling, in the meantime with a digital camera, and exhibits and publishes in books and changing constellations. Since the late 1990s, Tillmann has also created totally non-representational works, produced directly in the darkroom. The series Lighter and Freischwimmer, Swimming to Freedom, experiment on color-filtered exposure, photochemical paper, and emulsion, resulting in abstract pictures and art objects. Especially the Lighter series, buckled photo paper and acrylic glass boxes, describes culture in character, as you see here. In his recent abstract series Silver, Tillmann's passed photo paper, at times unexposed, at times exposed, to various colored light sources through a developer machine in which is left, in varying degrees of concentration, water and tracing of used chemicals, particularly silver nitrate, hence the name of the series Silver. As the paper travels through the machine, it acquires various streaks, scratches, dents, and deposits, which alter not only the colors, but also the physical surface of the paper. As you say here, the silver works are presented in 2 different modes, as the unique photo paper, smaller one, and as enlarged print. The silver works are a result of an interaction between a mechanical procedure and a natural mineral chemical process. Therefore, Tillmann likes describing the silver works as being the result of an observation of nature. In this way, he argues very much like the inventors of photography, who describe the photographic procedure as a natural process in which a prominent role is played by chance. Through Tillmann's procedure, unexpected, unrepeatable pictures come into being. Only from a distance could they be confused with paintings. If you get closer, you become aware of the technical production of the pictures. They display traces that cause a strong reality effect, as would a very detailed photograph. My second example comes from the work of Adrian Sauer. Sauer completed a postgraduate diploma in fine art and photography at the Leipzig Academy of Visual Arts in 2005. His examination of the digital may also, but not exclusively, result in abstract pictures. Here, for instance, you see an installation view of his work 60,777,216 colors. I practiced in that time. From the beginning of his career, Sauer has dealt with the impact of digitalization on our perception of photography. Seen from a distance, these examples, taken from the series No/Photographs, show rather boringly photographed cityscapes. When you get closer, however, they become blurry and somehow uncanny. In an extensive post-production process, Sauer eliminated all the details that tangibly reveal the medium's indexicality, the contingencies by which a photograph is linked to a specific moment in time. For example, the dirt on the facades. The above-mentioned nearly 17 million colors goes deeper into the digital by revealing its mathematical algorithmic nature. The title refers to the number of different colors generated by the RGB color space with the additive model of color synthesis. Sauer developed a program that produces images that contain all of these colors exactly once, ordered at random. The image takes us to the limits of our perception. Instead of a variety of colors, we see only a uniform color noise. The digital here only becomes accessible in its inaccessibility. Here you see a different mode of output in gradient 1. Much easier to grasp is the piece Unboxing Photoshop, referring in a tongue-in-cheek way to a popular YouTube genre. In a sequence of photograph, it shows an act that will soon appear archaic. Namely, when physical data storage formats such as CDs or DVDs have become completely obsolete. My last example is a work by Victoria Binstock, a Berlin-based photographer who refers to images taken from media sources as well as images she makes herself in order to discuss her function and representation there. In the serious world of details, Binstock took as his starting point images selected from Google Street View. In recent years, there have been a number of artists as well as numerous amateurs who browse the vast archive of Google Street View in search of unusual images, generating a kind of second-order street photography. Binstock's approach was more complex. She didn't only filter views with a specific subject, in her case, people in the streets of Manhattan who look into the camera and who are actually aware of being photographed. She also went physically to the chosen sites in order to make her own picture of the existing reality on site. She explored the location by focusing her attention on various details. The two images, the one taken from Google Street View and the one she shot herself, were then arranged into a diptych. The Street View image pictures are presented as small black and white inkjet prints mounted on MDF. Binstock's own photographs, on the other hand, are large format analog C-prints which are visibly fixed into the frame with tapes. The framed edges of the photographic prints, notes and technical details on the side of the prints, f-stops and shutter speeds for the darkroom are all references to an analog image technology. Oh, you can't see it very well here. You have to look very closely and in some cases check the Street View image against the photograph several times. The dining room is at the very left edge of the Google Street View, to discover that it's really the same site. While the reference pictures depict the sections of the street from a certain distance and from a higher level, the artist zooms in and thus contrasts the image taken by the automatic camera mounted on the Google Street View vehicle with something finally very human. A special interest, a fragmentary gaze, a plutone, leaving space for the beholder's imagination. As you have seen, the examples presented reflect in a very different ways on the materiality of photography. Tillmans explores the aesthetic effect of chemical photography, its processes and materials. Sauer attempts to bring into a comprehensible image something that otherwise would remain sealed up in the black box of digital processing. Victoria Binstock tests the truth of Google Street View and opposes the authenticity of an artistic gaze to the authenticity of the automatic photo. For me, all three examples are evidence that the question about the medium specificity of photography is not obsolete. Nevertheless, the question has to be posed again and again, not only in relation to different photographic uses, but also in relation to its different materialities. Yes, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Susanne Holschbach. And before we pass to the next speaker, there are perhaps urgent questions in the audience, just a few. I've got one myself, if I may do the kickoff. The title of today's Lunch Byte is Medium Photography. Since we are invited to speak about photography, it is perhaps good to focus a little bit more on the vocabulary. We talk about photography, photographs, we talk about images, pictures, photographic images. It seems to be a way to focus more precisely on what we mean. But why this almost Babylonic complexity of the right use of the word photograph when an image, and is there a preference to your opinion?
Oh, that's a very difficult question to start with, I think. Yes, I thought about it by preparing my presentation, and I realized it. Yes, I think I talk about photography or photo when I talk about taking a photo, in the moment of taking a photo. And there is a transformation in presenting it. And yes, then it may become a picture at the wall, on the wall. Yes, and I refer to a photo when I will stress its referentiality, yes, to reality in some kind. And I refer to an image, yes, when I refer to the circulation of images, for example, and to picture, yes, when I want to stress the aesthetic impact. But I have to confess that I not always have, yes,
that you don't use them strictly.
Yes. Yeah, no, that I wanted to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Because sometimes I've got a feeling that an image is more related to the immaterial, ephemeral image, while a photograph is more related to the material, physical world. So therefore perhaps more the old-fashioned way, but sometimes there seems to be an anachronism in the use of the term. So I thought I specify this before we even talk about it. Are there questions in the audience on Susanne's talk before we pass to the next one? Not a single one. This is typical Dutch. Okay. Katrina Sluis. It was already mentioned.
Yes.
Anna goes last. Yeah. If you want to have verbal evidence that Katrina really lost her voice, please say something. No, it's
Sorry, everyone.
Here it is. We decided that I will do Katrina's lecture. Luckily, she prepared in such a manner that everything is written down, and she was not intended to do everything by heart. So there is a written speech. So please listen to my voice. It's merely a voice, but look at Katrina, because she's the author. I've got nothing to do with it. Nonetheless, you will push the button from time to time to, well, show an image. Here we go. When the Photographers Gallery announced its plans to launch a digital program to coincide with its 2012 reopening, I was curious yet apprehensive. The gallery's interest in photography and computation extends as far back as 1991, when Paul Womble curated the seminal photo-video exhibition in Great Newport Street. Why, 22 years later, was there a need to devote part of the program exclusively to the digital? What does it mean to focus on photography's ongoing transformation in purely technical terms? Is it even possible to address the recent shifts in internet image production within the hermetically sealed space of the museum? These questions, of course, are far from new. The debates triggered by the migration of the digital-born image into public cultural institutions revisit those raised in the 1990s, when internet art began to be shown in and collected by museums. Having joined the gallery as curator of the digital program over 2 years ago, I accepted there is a strategic benefit to signposting the gallery's interest in and commitment to resourcing projects and research in this area. Nonetheless, the problem remains that the digital is not in itself a new photographic medium, but a hybrid set of technological practices. The gallery's creation of a specialist digital curatorial role has also occurred at the point when social technologies have prompted a rethink of established forms of cultural value. The task, then, is not to create a new digital canon of artists and photographers linked to a longer historical continuum, but rather to consider whether digital ecologies should lead us to think about the image in new and interdisciplinary ways. And for galleries and museums, which have largely seen technology as an accessory to their main concerns, there is a pressing need to understand how networked media influences their role, mediating between people and cultural objects. The question of what would become the inaugural show of the digital program was therefore a tricky one. Although there had been a lot of interest in the gallery's commissioning of a permanent display for digital work, both internally and externally, I don't think anyone had a clear idea what it might look like, apart from an early visualization of the ground floor cafe, predictably immersed in a gleaming world of screens. In this vein, it could be argued that a 2.7 by 3 meter video wall we eventually installed in the gallery offers a fetishistic yet paradoxically retro vision of technology. However, as a platform for photography, it has the advantage of belonging to the contemporary visual world of the CCTV control room or nearby Oxford Street, rather than the cinematic spaces of gallery-based video art. Inspired by the contemporary hybridization and dispersal of the photographic image online, born in 1987, the animated GIF became the first show to light up the media wall. An image file format native to the web, the GIF has been creatively used and abused by web designers, marketeers, artists and net enthusiasts over its 26-year history. The show was part of a wider strategy to bring into the gallery the expertise of different communities, whether they be GIF creators or, more recently, cat photographers, whose practices and cultural knowledge can shed light upon photographic culture today. Whilst the exhibition opened with over 40 GIFs sourced from a range of practitioners, they formed the basis of a wider call to the online community for their responses. These were then fed back into the media wall for the duration of the show. In his essay accompanying the exhibition, Matt Fuller argues that, I quote, "The story of photography will be in no small part that of its file formats, the kinds of compression and storage it undergoes, as they in turn produce what is conjurably as an image." End of quote. As GIFs twinkle and spread online, they remind us that the image today is intimately linked to the politics of software and the agencies of bodies and machines that lie behind the screen. This has been all but overlooked in histories of photography, where digitization has commonly been associated with immateriality and the disappearance of the photographic object. Because photography traditionally been valued for its capacity to visualize or represent the world, it remains difficult for institutions to engage with digital processes that emphasize the dynamics of reproduction over content. There is presently a conflict between those who view photography as primarily a pictorial representational medium in which the creative work of the photographer as author should be valued, and those who argue a much broader conception of the photographic as the default domain of the image today. This is because historically, photography's cultural value has been asserted by defining the photograph as the outcome of an artistic vision captured through mechanical means. This in turn made it possible to develop a canon of photography through which the medium could infiltrate both the art museum and the global art market. However, it is worth noting that photography was not always associated with modernist ideas of authorship. The medium was not initially going to be covered under the US Copyright Act of 1865. In their fight to have the medium accepted, photographers embraced pictorialism, which imbues the image with a painterly aesthetic through manipulation of the photographic process. 20 years later, the copyright law was challenged by those who argued that machines produce photographs and not human beings, and that photos therefore lacked originality. The court disagreed, declaring that photos were authored by people, and therefore they satisfied the law's originality requirement. This was based on the dominant style of pictorialism, in which photographs were original because photographers used models, elicited expressions, posed sitters, staged backgrounds, and otherwise altered reality. And although pictorialism was eventually abandoned as a strategy, what remained was an emphasis on originality and creativity. Today, the problem is no longer that the medium is dismissed as the inferior handmaiden to science and art, as in the 19th century. Instead, it is that photography is privileged as a medium for the production of artworks, rather than a system of dissemination and reproduction. On this basis, I think it is interesting that, in the UK at least, the point at which the photography has finally been embraced by the art world and deemed collectible by the Tate, photography has been completely diffused into general computing. And whilst we have been in a post-photographic moment for over 2 decades, it is clear that it is not digital photography's malleability, but its networkedness and softwareization which represents the latest stage in photography's ongoing revolution. On screen, the photograph has on one level just become software output, and commercial photography increasingly happens not in the photography studio, but in 3D software such as Maya or Lightwave. This loss of specificity and identity extends beyond the screen. For many people, their primary camera is their mobile phone, and the digital SLR is no longer the exclusive tool of photography students, and is now coveted equally by film students. Across the UK, university courses are decommissioning their darkrooms, and photo students now work in the computer lab, much to the dismay of their tutors. Photography has become softwareized and algorithmically constituted, automated and black-boxed. The paradox produced by the circulation of the photographic image in digital culture is that whilst the screen transmission produces something other than a photograph, its precise effect in everyday life is to make the photographic image more present and sentient. Faced with the exponential onslaught of photographers and their images online, a recent wave of exhibitions have focused on new work which reasserts the materiality of the photograph. The return to unique printing processes guarantees the photograph's status as precious object and the distinction of the artist's voice. At the same time, Legal and institutional frameworks mean that the exhibition of orphaned images and viral ephemera by museums is problematic. If museums, galleries and more generally public cultural institutions wish to maintain their claim to be representational through collection, exhibition, education and curation, then the argument goes they will have to find ways of engaging with network culture in order to discover who their publics are and how they are behaving. For the Photography Museum, the challenge is to reflect these shifts rather than to reify a small portion of photographic practice, subsumed under the rubric of contemporary art. If, following Heidegger, that technology is nothing technological, then the job is to expose what this technology reveals, rather than reifying it. The challenge, therefore, is to elaborate, visualize, or question the ways in which photographs are manufactured, dispersed, interpreted, and stockpiled. Thank you, Katrina.
Thank you, Katrina and Marcel. Any urgent questions at this point? If not, then we have a perfect next presentation that perfectly ties in with what we just heard, of what the question that was just posed at the end of this presentation, namely how can digitization and digital technologies be reflected in the practices of artists today?
It's changing, and what future images, pictures can be. I had to look at the past, and it's a bit of a cliche, but there's one crucial idea there that I thought was worth bringing across. Just I wanted to show. Let's see where my images are. Okay, I need to change something quickly. Okay, I got it. Oh, thanks. Yeah, this is not very popular part of photography that it's besides digitalized, it's also on every other surface available now, and I think that's also like something that affects us in our everyday life a lot, and that puts like just to put photography back in as a category under images and pictures. I thought I'd show like quickly like how pictures help us to navigate in the world and affect our beliefs and understanding of the world. So I have here like a really quick slideshow. I'm going to not explain every image, but it shows like the oldest from up to the latest imagery of how the world was explained. And it's like, it's beautiful how like reality and fiction are like extremely impacting each other here, and like yeah, so, and okay, oops, Babylonian stone, one of the first world views, is explained what it is, the different. So the world was always depicted as an island in the water. You have still flat world, and all of this was also highly political in a way. And this is a Moroccan map upside down. Mappa Mundi, entering the medieval. Yeah, this is Columbus map. This is the first, well, not the first, but the swimming spheric images, starting to, like, science helping out here. So, sun in the middle. And here we see, like, good example how the church was still trying to hold on to the flat earth, even though there was a lot of evidence that there was something round going on. And, so this is a solution. So in this map, it's making fun of people that believe that the world was round. But these are also old versions of the same. And then we reached the first satellite image of the world, and then it was like this, the moment of mechanical objectivity was a relief. So yeah, all these images we know, and they really tie into a first history of internet culture and the ideologies that were there. So this is the farthest away picture of the Earth. Also, same as the other images we just saw, were very popular with environmentalists to address what reality we live. And then we go into more mosaic satellite pictures, like multiple satellites, and sort of this is like an illustration of where we are. And then I think it's interesting maybe to mention that photography is already not really capable to show us an accurate reality, because we know so much more about reality, and so how to depict that. And so I think that is somehow synchronized with virtual reality and 3D, like, which is like, we're looking for other ways to communicate what we understand. And so this is the last picture in this. This is on I'm not sure which planet, but it also shows next to the picture, and I think an X-ray. And I think this is sort of the stage where we are with photography. If they're trying to be realistic, there will be a lot of other data files attached, and I mean, Google Maps is also part of this. So now to my own work. Here is a nice work of David Joblowski in the front. So, in the back, there's my work, and that work started with, I took some simple photographs of fruits at the time. It was like with my iPhone, and then it made me think. Wait, by the way, is there a way that I can see the images here, perhaps? Or is that
There should be a way.
Okay, no problem. Okay, just gonna turn around a bit. And then I'm taking it, that seems like the most simple, easy thing to do, and take a picture of a few fruits, and then I followed. I was thinking, as an artist, this could perhaps be an art piece. Why not? And then, and I guess, yeah, okay. Well, what I did was I tried to follow, to understand what really happened. So I traced, made a list of what it took to make this simple image. And on the right side, you see the work, and zoomed in here. And it starts with showing the supermarkets where I bought these fruits, and it shows the production addresses of these fruits as well. So where I got the fruit plus where they got the fruit, so it's only addresses. And then it follows the discourse from how this becomes the digital file and able to print out. Like it goes through the lens, the chip, and so on. All the way to into my computer, the software, USB cable here and there, printer, ink, and then paper, and then up to the clips. So yeah, so you see this. You can't really read it now, but can see like all these addresses from all over the world that were involved in allowing us to make that simple picture. And I thought why I was attracted to do this mostly is also to show, to sort of go away from the romantic idea of being an artist, showing like using these technologies. We are kind of like the smallest, last tiny step after a very long, mostly economical, technological process, and I think photography. Yeah. Okay. Well, here next, I'll try to speed up a little bit. Here next image. This is like a press image of the Katanga mines, where tungsten and coltan and other materials are being delved and used for mobile phones. And I was interested how I was able to see this image on my mobile phone, and what the complexity of media being involved in at the same time causing this problem. And so I felt like, can I make this these two ends of the spectrum, that the image is really important in this. Can I somehow combine that? So I rephotographed this image underwater, and then sort of as like a advertisement of like U2O5. For example, they use a lot of bubbles, and this is a very popular thing at the time for mobile phones. And then on top of them, you see like small the original images in the mobile phones on top of it. Okay, well, I'll just go into, this is a video still of a video forecast for which I used I took photographs actually in Amsterdam of the sky, and I imported them in a three-dimensional rendered video space. And you fly through these images, and there's a text that explains the relativity theory, but it slowly turns into music over time. And what I thought was interesting is, like, in this video, you experience different elements of space, like in the picture, but also the space in the 3D generated space. And the text explains how reality is different from how we experience it, and it somehow is like illustrated in using these images in the different media versions. I'm a little bit distracted by the not seeing properly, but yeah. So I presented this image, this video, often in relationship with another piece. It's a very linear presentation of time, but the other one is like a dynamic understanding of time. And it's a calendar of 42 meters long. The 2,250 years is the age of Aquarius, the whole age. And it starts in 1962, an alignment of planets on the 4th of February, and every day is presented, and you only like from then up to now is like less than a meter, and then it leads you further into the future, like to a point that is incomprehensible, and also like physically it hardly fits in any space like to exhibit it, and so there's beauty in it. So this also to try to capture a reality that is like beyond anthropocentric, away from our human perception. And and this continued a bit in these pieces, staircases here with towels with future dates on them. That I used internet to Google these dates, and I found like faraway dates that were already full of information about them, and often showed basically the grid for put advertisement up, or already also real events like NASA is sometimes, if you're lucky, you found a real planetary event, but most of it is like computer-generated, limited calendar. And I thought it's kind of scary to see that everything is already being structured in a certain way. And,
sorry, can I ask how?
Yeah, please.
How far in the future?
This is
That far?
no, I went up to 4,000. I mean, I think I printed up to something in 4,000. But yeah, you should try it. It's interesting. It's always very cryptic, weird computer language, and this was another piece that sort of tried to capture the sort of internet-y organization in a material way to sort of try to capture the okay, then we'll speed up. This is other photo pieces that I use on the blended material. Idea of recursion, also a computer. So by all these pieces I somehow apply like a computer elements to photography. And these are poles threaded with sneaker imprints, and that was based on when I went to Morocco. I was in the desert, and we all ran off to photograph the sun rising. Everywhere there was this steps, and I thought it was like, even me, I was like, okay, I want to have that perfect picture. I believe in this untouched nature moment here, and but then it was impossible to get away from these steps. I thought it was so interesting. I mean, I managed to get rid of the other tourists, but then I was like, why do you not want to see these traces of other tourists, you know? And then I tried to transcend these steps and these poles in a way, like, and draw a connection to Vries, who was an essentialist and who believed that his shapes were not abstractions, but they were more real than reality. But it was also like a closed, fixed reality. And with these pieces, I tried to more show like a process-based reality, but also like something that's impacted by design. That is, and I mean, sneakers also coming straight out of computer in a way in terms of form and technology involved. Okay, I'll just give me 30 seconds. This is reflections of cave painting. I photographed it on the mirror foil, and when I made these, I wanted to relate also to like new digital images that were in 2009 coming everywhere, and sort of draw a connection between future and past. And this is like a NASA image which I connect like North Pole and South Pole. Yeah, you know what I mean? Okay. Well, we'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. And we saw a lot of images and there was a lot of information. Do you have any questions specifically for Anne at this point? Yes?
I was just wondering whether you could reflect a bit more, maybe a little bit more explicitly on how you relate to the medium of photography in your own work, or to taking photographs, or to the image or image making. Maybe just a little bit more explicit reflection on the role of the medium of photography.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me, photography is, as for maybe everybody else that is interested in visual images, and I mean, photography is so embedded in everything in the world. And it's really through the medium I see what I can discover within what I'm interested in. So it's just part of the working process. So I could easily not mention photography as well, but for example, somehow I end up coming back to it because it helps me to articulate thoughts. Wait, is that an answer at all?
And also, if you look at your works, most of the works actually use photography as one element or another, right? Either by reworking them in videos or by making sculptural objects out of digital images and photos, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it is part of your practice in that sense, but in a way more malleable way that also includes other form of expressions such as sculpture or video, etc.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I have a related question, I think. You showed, well, all the attempts of mankind to somehow picture the world, whether prehistoric or medieval up to the current age. And you made it quite clear that reality, as we know now, is far too complex to picture or to visualize by means of a single medium. It's always limited, it's always handicapped. And we now are fully aware of these handicaps. So we try to deal with it one way or another. For instance, by using other mediums or adding information, as you did with the fruits represented and pictured. You added all the information just to show, look how how complex taking a single picture is and how limited its response corresponds with our notion of reality. What we see now is that I think through this awareness that a lot of artists, including yourself, is focusing more and more on the nature of the medium used and the handicaps and perhaps the possibilities far more than to the world. It's about process far more than a representational picture of the world. So do you think this is only because we are now living in a transitional period, because we have to deal with the new media, or do you think this is something that will last forever, simply because we know each medium is a problem?
Yeah, that's a good question, but yeah, I think most of all I believe that even a picture is not photographical. A new picture, let's say picture, is not a document anymore. It's still part of reality and it's still real, even though it is an articulation of thought. And this can also be looked at in maybe a closer, more articulated way somehow. But why do certain themes come back over and over again? So it shifts, I guess, more to the viewer and why the viewer is attracted to it, and exactly that's what becomes very visible with new technologies and the network images, that we get to see the process-based image validation. So I think,
Okay. Katrina, perhaps we give it an attempt. Something for you to elaborate upon a little bit more, because you in your text you referred to almost the origins of photography and the debate that it caused, whether it was just mechanical or it was human and therefore art. This year we celebrate, or not, 175 years of photographical history. And it seems to me that we are almost in the process of reinventing photography, with all the struggles and all the experiments that goes with it. How do you see this period? It's a very general question. Are we witnessing a transitional period, and do you have an idea that it leads to an end point, or is it something that will last forever? Almost the same question I asked Alan.
I'll briefly answer that question. I whisper. I think that the digital is becoming less a useful term, and that the computational is actually much more useful in thinking about these shifts that are happening in terms of photography and the way in which authorship, the way that computers are increasingly an important audience for photography, as well as animals as creators of photographs. And this creates questions for authorship, for representation, and it's become much more processual, as you were just saying. Yeah.
So the processual plays a way more important role. Is this something you can attest to as well, Susanne? Is this something that you that you would agree with?
Yes, I completely agree with it. And yes, what strikes me on what you said, Marcel, that it got much more complex, and that this might be a reason for that many artists draw on the process of photography materiality, or that there is a kind of retro movement, and it's because it is much more difficult to grasp what is the digital is about. Yes, I found it very impressive, your work, because yes, it shows something of this complexity of yes, the networked image, but reality today, and the complexity to show it. And you can't refer to this complexity by making photographs. Yes, and interesting are, for me, are works interesting that are reflecting on the uses of the medium of photography. Yeah, and that now is the uses of networked images, and you showed some very interesting examples. Yes, but you see it's much more complex, and I think we haven't understand it by now.
So what I deduce from your talk as well is that we return to an interest in the materiality of images as well. Isn't that, so can we say that we become more interested again in medium specificity in an age in which actually the medium is dissolving? Is this a counter movement, or how do these movements relate to each other?
I think it's a parallel movement. I think artists are much more aware of yes, the different ways of creating images, and the different transformations from a photo to a represented image or picture, and they have to be more reflected on this. What it means what it means in Yes, what it means concerning the aesthetic effect of different representation, but also of the meaning that are constructed by different forms of representation.
I think this is an interesting topic, and I want to focus upon it a little bit more, because there seems to be a paradox almost. If you work with the process, and therefore with photographical material, whether from your own creation or found on the internet or wherever, most of the time the image, and I continue to use image deliberately, is most of the time immaterial, it's somewhere on a screen, and it's really dependent on your own technological tools, how it is presented to you. But it's there to change and alter, because the base is just a pixel, it's a modular system of algorithms, and so you can do everything with it. And during the process, most of the time, the image is translated from one screen to another screen, from one context to another context, and with every step, the nature and value of the original image changes. There is hardly a need to transform it into a material, object. Why should you, as an artist? If not for sheer economical reasons, because it's nice to have an object, because you can show it in a gallery, you can sell it to a museum or to a collector, but isn't it a very old-fashioned anachronistic last step to make it into a spatial object, Anna?
Yeah, well, I think in the end it's about the experience you have that you create. And yeah, I idealize the digital image over a material image. Like, for me, I think I would be happy with that. I really appreciate it. I think also thinking about the digital, like, it's also a common thought that we get to experience the digital also very much outside of the digital. I think it's already like relational aesthetics, if you even put into that category, somehow inspired by the digital. So yeah, I think if you're interested in the digital and how it impacts the world, definitely interesting to get it out of its own environment and see how it behaves in a different media. And I think recently I was thinking about, is there a way to combine like media theory with queer theory, media being some sort of in a state of media bending, constantly, like the 8-bit transformation that's constantly taking place, objects being rephotographed, going back online, maybe used again, coming offline, and that's just offline, online, but it also counts for all other media at this point. You know, we're constantly changing, swifting, so yeah.
It's perhaps easier for an artist to relate to this changing platforms and this changing context. But what, Katrina, if you're a curator at a museum with a collection and added value, how do you relate to something that is far more about the process than about the end product?
This is the question, absolutely.
I was wondering if there was an answer. Sorry?
Well, this is the exhaustion of the photographic image, in a way, is what we're talking. And it's interesting that artists like, you're not including the gallery in that system of representation that you're sort of interested in. So the Apple image is so deconstructed, but then it's placed in a gallery, which also creates value
wondering, I mean, it's of course a big question, but if we break it down a little bit, how is it to be the curator of digital programs? How do you exhibit pieces in the space? How do you make it work in an institution that is a traditional photography museum? How does that function?
I said in my job interview that aren't you heralding the end of photography by hiring me, and that actually also to be exhibiting screen-based photography on a very big screen in the gallery is really talking about, isn't this to a computer, it's video, or is it just data? And it emphasizes the cultural aspect of the photographic. So whilst photography is being obliterated by digital, it remains as a cultural kind of idea. And so in that respect, everything that happens in that gallery is not untouched by the digital. Even the photographic prints on the wall are still framed by the digital. So my position then was to begin to bring some of these questions that network media bring into the museum and try and align other kinds of culture with the museum. So that's been my short answer.
Which changes, I think, the nature or tasks, function of a museum compared, well, to the very old 18th century Enlightenment model, because it's now become far more a house of discourse, a debate, because we don't have a final verdict that we can show as an artifact to explain the world. The only things that we actually have is ourselves, to talk and debate the problems. On the other hand, and Susanne, I thought it was striking in your example, you ended with Wolfgang Tillmans, the Silver series, which focused upon the process as well, the process that was the basis of the origin of the print, shown in a very physical manner, in a way also related to Walid Beshti's series. It was made with X-rays. How do you judge this tension between the material and the immaterial, and therefore also the lasting artifact and the immaterial image that is always changing context, and has never a fixed and therefore also debatable presence? How do you consider this tension between the material and the immaterial, the timeless and the time-based?
Yeah, I think the role of the artists concerning the digital is a kind of translation what we can grasp, and bring this in a kind of, yes, a kind of comprehensible form. But concerning Wolfgang Tillmans, yes, I think he wants to create beautiful pictures in this sense, but also, yes, wants to translate and show the process of chemical photography and its aesthetic effects. Yeah, but I think in general, between the tension between the material and the materiality, yes, I want to refer to my second example, Adrian Sauer. What he shows, it's although it results into an image, or should I say picture in this case.
When there's a frame, there might be a picture.
Yes. What is so striking in this example that I'm not able to understand it. Yes, it shows that the digital space of color is a limited space, although there are nearly 17,000 colors. It's limited, and so far different to the analog. But I still can't see it. But this helps me to reflect on it, yes, on this dimension of the, yes, mathematical or algorithmic nature of the digital.
If we focus a little bit more on the algorithmic nature, and I just mentioned also the modular system. Sometimes I think of images, in this case, almost as IKEA products. I mean, you get a fixed amount of building blocks and you can make whatever. And then I thought, well, there might be even an economical way of approaching pictures, because you have these building stones and you can do whatever. It's almost like a commodity. How do you see this, Anna? The economical part of the artistic practice. And I don't mean selling your work in galleries, but I mean the intrinsic nature of the image itself.
Right. Yeah, I think we have to look beyond, outside of the art world for this to illustrate it best. Like, if you look at the upcoming stock photography that really managed to capitalize on this, this is we have an image now that is has at least as possible cultural references, and therefore it gets relevant through its circulation. That's where it gains agency, and so yeah, it's sort of a turnaround. What becomes valuable in that sense, like the more neutral, the more successful this image becomes, and exactly like what you described, like being an IKEA piece. That's a good illustration of it. Yeah.
So you have the stock photography on one hand side, but then you have photographs that can actually be adapted and manipulated and gain value through these manipulations. And by traveling through and over platforms like Tumblr, and always getting a little bit adapted, a little bit modulated, they gain capital through these processes, right?
Right.
So this is also a way of gaining value, but then in another format or in another form.
Yeah, I think just to add to this, there are a couple of projects right now that really try to play with these borders and how images can easily trans into different contexts. Like the last images that were on the screen, they were part of a stock project where this magazine in New York, and this images was a project where they asked artists to make stock photography that can behave as such within for a company or whatever, like anything goes, but it also appears in an art context, like there were some exhibitions with it. And it's an interesting idea because it really reduces the image to a material that such like a piece of wood, let's say, that can be added on, used for multiple purposes, and that's like maybe something that wasn't really happening before.
Sorry, Katrina, I saw you reacting when I referred to the image as a commodity, right? Can you explain a little bit more about, is it a proper way to address the image almost as a commodity within perhaps a commercial framework or commercialized framework?
Again, a very big question.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, if you read, there is a growing discussion among scholars around this question of photocapitalism or image capitalism, of which the network, the gallery, the magazine, all the art world all takes, is part of the system, basically. And globalization is part of that as well, so it's not to say that the gallery or the artist or the curator is outside of that. value of the gallery image traditionally. And to give an example of that, there was an attempt to sell animated GIFs previously, and because they survive through their ability to go over networks, in order for it to be sellable and collectible, it was required to be taken down off the network to create artificial scarcity in order for it to have value. And of course the GIF community went, oh my god, this is blasphemy, this is horrific. And I think what we're seeing here at the moment is a very interesting coming together of art and media, and a lot of the kind of anxieties about medium specificity are coming out of those things coming together that were formerly quite apart, and the cultural value coming out of that.
So we have a couple of minutes for questions from the audience. If you have any questions, I see a hand in the very back.
I have a question for Anna specifically. I was wondering how the image functions in your work as a sculpture. So you see an image of your work and you see that specifically the word steps of recursion, and first you think it's like these sneakers melt together, but when you see the close-up shots, you see it's this prints. I also see these sort of sculptural qualities and playing with the image in the work of Rachel Bühler, where she plays the sculpture and also plays the image photograph of the sculpture alongside it. What are your thoughts about that?
How they relate to each other is different.
Yeah, material.
Well, the steps of recursion. I mean, that piece, I'm happy that I cannot just explain it and be like, that's an illustration of this thought, but why I made these pieces, because a couple of ideas are, they stick to it, let's say, like it brings a couple of ideas together in one object, but you want to know where this comes from, or like how it is made, or like, well, yeah. Well, recursion being like a fractal, basically something that is in everywhere in nature, but also mathematical and computer science. So this, where like the digital and the biological, evolutionary sort of comes together in this very contemporary current sneaker. I thought it was interesting to bring that sort of in relation with each other. The sneaker being like a climax of design, and also not just in a way ergonomics, but also a lot of semi-ergonomics. There's a lot of visual, suggestive design involved, and I thought that was interesting because that's also part of evolution ultimately, and I don't know, like that these sneakers became they became this way for a certain reason, and therefore they repeat. Therefore they're still here. I mean, I don't know. It's like I kind of really try to bring thoughts together that I also don't really know if they belong together. So, but yeah, I'm just sort of trying to go in a certain direction with it.
I think maybe the question was also why you moved from an image to sculpture, right? That was also like the relation between the photograph and sculpture.
Yeah, and maybe it could also be a sculpture made out of these sneakers, but then you use the image.
Right. Yeah. No. That piece is really also something to experience. Like it's like a weird object that you don't really get. That makes it more interesting, like on a very physical level. Like, what is this? You know, it's very alien, and I guess that's also a quality that I enjoy. But yeah, I don't have really a clear answer to it, I guess.
There's another question. Yes, please, and out can't reach you with the microphone. So you have to reach me.
I've got a question. I'm not sure who it is for. Maybe you would like to answer it. But historically, photography has been used many times to document whenever technology has an advancement. But it's also been said today even that photography has a link to what is physical, what is reality. But now that a lot of technical advances are actual virtual reality, and they are not maybe easy to catch for photography, is there still a role for photography in documenting these changes?
Susanne, may I give you the honor?
Yes, I still believe in this traditional way of documenting. I think photography also, yes, still can make, yes, documentaries, but there is the documentary. No, what I want to say is that documentary photography has also a place, but it's only one element of what photography is about as a medium. It's only a small part, but it's still yes, a reflection on reality in yes, a very small section, but I think it also has an importance. Yes.
If I may ask, I think that photography, and again the term is troubled because the definition thing which I started the debate with is still here, but I think the photographical is perhaps more suitable to address those virtual questions than ever, given the fact that it is intrinsic to the nature of photography, even in the early beginning, that there is a very handicapped way to relate to the world, and there's a constant need, and it's a constant in the history of photography, to also critically reflect upon the nature of the toolkit, so to speak, in itself. And I see this is exactly what's happening at the moment. People are more than ever addressing the own medium and the medium specificity. That's such a difficult word. Nonetheless, you know what I mean. So I think more than ever, it's now not about documenting or representing the world outside the medium, which might be a problem, but more and more about, say, the medium itself, including also all the virtual elements which are part of the context in which the image functions. So I think it's a perfect way to address these questions, given the fact that it's really hard to say, to give it an exact label.
So we're already over time, and I think we need to close the discussion for today. I would like to thank everybody on the panel. It was a really interesting discussion, I hope, and I thought. I would like to thank you for coming. The next Lunch Bytes event at FOAM will take place on June 15, June 15. I hope to see you again then. We will talk about the archive then, and how the notion of the archive database has influenced photography, digital images, as well as online culture in general. Thanks again for coming, and have a good Sunday.